Hello there, everyone. I'm going to give you a practice today that's going to seem really simple, but don't let the simplicity fool you, because this practice has the capacity to change the game of life and how life feels. Ego is essentially nothing more than a sense of separate self. Your ego is comprised of anything you identify with. Now, obviously, to perceive yourself as a separate thing, you have to perceive yourself as different to everything around you. You cannot conceptualize of what you are unless you conceptualize of what you are not. An easier way of understanding this is to say that you cannot conceptualize of yourself as Joe until you are aware that you are not Nancy. This means the ego only exists in a state of comparison. It cannot exist without comparison. This process of individualization benefits us in certain ways, but there's a heavy price to pay for it as well. The price is separation. When we conceive of ourselves as a separate self, we are immediately not a part of anything we define as other. This is the true origin of loneliness. The mind naturally spends all its time comparing. The mind essentially is used by the ego, the sense of self, to keep itself going through this comparison. When we think about comparison thinking, we often think about it in the classic terms of how we usually use it, which is things like, that person has more money than me, or I'm more pretty than that person. That's the typical painful comparison that we're talking about. But comparison thinking goes far, far beyond that. It goes to things we wouldn't naturally identify as painful, such as, I am a girl and that is a boy, or I am a person and that is an apple. The ego will not stop doing this all day, every day, because what is the ego? The ego is a sense of separate self. So what happens if it stops comparing? It dies. Comparison thinking is the only reason that ego can continue to exist. This means upon coming into this life, that you're essentially intact with a mechanism that is designed to keep you separate from other things, to have you perceive yourself as different to other things, to separate you from things in the world instead of unite you with the world. So what happens when our identity arises as a result of comparing ourselves with the world? Yet when we compare ourselves with the world around us and we find that everything around us is different to us, belonging goes straight out the window. Now when we're in this position where our comparison thinking that the ego continues to engage in continues to show us that everything around us is different to us and belonging goes out the window, ego has no other option but to identify with not belonging in and of itself. And when this happens, suddenly, the ego must continue to have you not belong, otherwise that aspect of itself must die. Separation causes suffering. Our society puts a lot of energy into the idea that we need to embrace differences and that differences are good. The idea that differences are good is one that can definitely be substantiated, but the opposite view can be substantiated as well. The feeling of separation and of being alone causes more or less suffering for us, depending on the level of trauma we experienced around connection with others. Because of this, for some of us, differences cause extreme pain. If we struggle with belonging, any differences in other people cause us to feel extreme pain because they immediately cause us to feel isolated. We relive the trauma of aloneness and abandonment and of not belonging anytime we encounter differences. Our ego self is therefore re-traumatizing us through comparison, which it does all day, every day. So instead of trying to be okay with differences, we need to consciously do the opposite. The reason that falling in love feels so incredibly good is that by falling in love, we take that person as ourselves. Now, if you were to watch the mind, what it's doing when we're falling in love is it's comparing itself to the other person like it always does, but it's completely focused on finding similarities. So, all day, every day, it's finding what's the same between itself and the other person. This causes a sense of unity. This causes a sense of belonging. This causes the dissolving of that separation. And so we feel that belonging, that sense of connection, that amazing oneness that we lost. This is why falling in love feels so damn good. And relationships start to feel painful when when the ego starts comparing itself to that other person in the relationship and starts to find differences instead. Now, there's a lot of people who are therapists in this setting, and what they say is that this phase of a relationship, the phase they call the autonomy phase of a relationship, is in fact healthy. It's when you're starting to find out how you're different. I don't actually agree with this philosophy. I'm in fact going to challenge you to realize that this is the point in your relationship where your ego has hijacked the relationship and has instead tried to create separation again by looking for differences between you and the person that you're around instead of similarities. We lose our experience of oneness. We stop feeling that same all-encompassing sense of belonging. We start to feel separated and isolated again. Essentially, your ability to feel belonging and oneness and unity is dependent upon your capacity to perceive similarities. You must be aware that to take on this process is to take on the practice of challenging the ego. It will take effort at first, but it is the antidote to feeling not belonging. And here it is. Notice that without trying, with no effort at all, your mind is constantly scanning the world around you and everything in it for differences. Then consciously switch to deciding to seek and acknowledge similarities in the world and everything in it instead. If you really want to dissolve your ego, then stop comparing. But for those of you in the world who heard that sentence and just thought, well, that sounds easier said than done, you're completely right. There is no red button that exists that you can push and just stop comparing. And when spiritual teachers say, just stop comparing, it does no good whatsoever, because I've never met a person who can actually do that. So instead, what I'm suggesting is to use your ego that naturally hijacks your mind in order to compare itself with the world to your advantage instead. Use your mind to compare itself to things and consciously find similarities instead of differences. Pretend to be a scientist that is intensely engaged in a project. Find as many similarities as you can with everything in existence. For example, find similarities between yourself and inanimate objects. Find similarities between yourself and your friends. Find similarities between one animal and another. Find similarities between yourself and your food. Find similarities between one person and another person. Find similarities between yourself and the things and people that you feel different from. And when you feel ready, find the similarities between yourself and the people you hate the most, the people you feel you do not belong with. Pay attention to the way you feel. Notice that you start to feel like you belong. Notice that the resistance melts away, and notice how life begins to feel connected and right. Live life with a mantra, how am I the same as, fill in the blank. There is no limit to what you can find similarities with, so get way, way outside the box when you're doing this practice. And I would encourage you, especially if you struggle with a sense of belonging, to make this your sole spiritual practice for a period of time. To feel separate from the universe you live in is to suffer, and it is the continual scanning of the environment and finding differences that fuels this form of suffering. The ego thinks that this is survival, because for the ego, which is not all who you really are, it quite literally is survival. But we have to come to a point where we're willing to ask, is survival really worth feeling this way every single day? If the answer is no, then our focus must switch from looking for differences to looking for the similarities between ourselves, the world, and everything in it. Have a good week.